Hey, everybody, we're live. Welcome to the Fish On podcast. Whether you're joining us live for the live stream on YouTube or you're listening to this later on your favorite podcast streaming platform, thanks for tuning in. Today, we've got Adam and Ben, the usual suspects, my co-hosts. My name is Jeff, and today we've got our special guest, Brodie from NWOOutdoors. Welcome to the show, Brodie.
Hey,
how you
guys,
doing?
thanks for having me. Good.
Good.
How you guys doing?
Great, man.
Good.
Pretty great.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going with the rest of the show?
All right. I'm Brodie. I'm a fisherman. I live in Thunder Bay, up in northwestern Ontario. I am the creator of the NWO Outdoors Instagram page, and I've got my NWO Outdoors website where I've got my blog and photographs and stuff like that. And for the most part, I'm just sharing what I do with people. So far, they seem to like it, so I'm just going to keep doing it, I guess, and go with the flow.
Awesome.
That's about it. Yeah.
And there is a link to Brodie's website in the description below. So before we get going with whatever else we're going to talk about, we're going to get through some of the housekeeping points. If you're watching this live, I would really appreciate it if you guys liked the live stream. Hit that little thumbs up down there. It helps us with some discovery, maybe bring some new people into the show. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast streaming platforms later on, go ahead and, if you don't mind, leave us a review, specifically on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show out. And that's really it. We'll get to some comments and some questions in the chat later on throughout the show. So don't be afraid to drop some. Don't be afraid to drop some questions and comments there. If we don't answer right away, it's not because we're ignoring you, but we'll get to them during the later segments. Anything else that I missed there, guys? That's pretty much it, right?
I think that's it. Thanks for joining us, Brodie.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
You did miss something, actually, Jeff.
What did I miss?
You missed the fact that you just recently caught like a giant lake trout
Yes.
on Lake Ontario. I think you forgot to mention that.
Well, it was my personal best lake trout and also the first lake trout I ever caught. I guess the first lake trout I ever caught would be my personal best, regardless of the size. But this one was enormous. It was. I'll be honest with you guys. I probably watched the video that I made about that myself probably like 20 times because I just wanted to look at that fish some more. And I still think about that fish. That was on Sunday. Yeah.
That was wicked.
Yeah, thanks,
congrats
guys.
again.
Yeah, big lake trout are neat. They're like dinosaurs.
Man, it was a wild fish, wild fight. The thing looked like a frickin' shark. As soon as I could see it, like down through the hole, it was, oh man, blew my mind.
Yeah, then the pressure's on. Don't lose it at the hole.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I had my my buddy John there who knew what he was doing, because I did not know anything about what I was doing. So
you were just in shock.
I don't know if it came through in the video, but poor John was like he was like almost shoulder deep in with his arm in the hole, trying to get a finger in under the gill plate of this trout so that we didn't lose it. Because there's no way I would have landed it without him, and he got a bit cold after that. But,
that's worth it though.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a fish of a lifetime for me. I'll be chasing that PB for a long time, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what keeps you coming back.
It definitely is.
For sure.
You could probably make it happen up on Lake Superior. Lake Superior is supposed to have like some of the biggest trout side of the border anyways.
Yeah, we got some giant trout. You don't see too many giant lake trout around Thunder Bay.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it's more on the other side of the lake. But we do. I mean, we share the lake with the southern border of it too. So we still have big trout. I mean, you're going to catch 25, 30 pounders here. But I mean, most of our lake trout are still probably around the 8 to 10 pound range, maybe even less, 5 to 10 pounds. But the thing is with Lake Superior, you've always got that potential for a world record, right? The lake's so big, it's got so much potential. Just because the average is on the smaller side, or not necessarily smaller side, but the average fish isn't 20 pounds. But knowing that you're on Lake Superior, you still always have that hope and that, the possibility of catching that world record lake trout. If it can come from anywhere, it's possible that it's going to come from Lake Superior. But
Yeah.
That's somewhere I'd like to fish for sure. That would be super cool.
That's a great place to start. So, Brodie, like, what areas do you fish? What kind of waters are you hitting? What area?
For the most part, I'm a trout guy, right? Like I fish for everything. I love fishing for pike just because they're big, right? I like big fish. Like perch fishing, while it's fun, doesn't really get me that excited. Like my blood's not going to start pumping over perch fishing, or even like stocked brook trout. Like again, they're fun, but most stocked brook trout you're going to get into. There's some lakes that have bigger trout, but the majority of them, if they've been recently stocked, or depending on what they've stocked them with, whether they're yearlings or what stage of their life cycle they're at, you're just not going to catch that many big fish. I want big pike, steelhead, salmon, big smallmouth bass. So for the most part, I'm fishing Lake Superior. And, I'm either casting the shorelines, I'm ice fishing in the winter. I don't really ice fish anywhere other than Lake Superior. Like I go for a couple pike trips and like I said, stock brook trout trips at the beginning of the season, only because Lake Superior takes a while to freeze up. If Lake Superior froze up the same time those small lakes would, or those small lakes do, I would never fish those small lakes. And when it comes to open water, I'm a river guy. So like I want to be on the river fishing, whether it's at the mouth of a river or wading up a river. So again, that kind of leans me towards trout fishing, right? And I mean, look at trout. I mean, they're pretty beautiful. It's hard not to like them, right? They get fairly big where I am anyway. I mean, we get brook trout, 26, 27 inches. Like they're large brook trout. I mean, you catch a brook trout 14 inches in the majority of the rest of the world, and that's a big brook trout. But that's a below average brook trout when it comes to some of the waters we have around here, like the Nipigon River and some of the other larger rivers down the shore, like down along Lake Superior. So, like for the most part, I'm a Lake Superior angler. I've always been fascinated by it. I do love my inland lakes and stuff like that too, but it's if I have a choice, I'm fishing Superior. There's just something about it. It's the size. It's unruly. You're at the whim of the lake when you're on it. You got to just go with the flow of things. It's a large lake, and it can humble you pretty quickly. And there's something about that it's appealing. It's all the shipwrecks and all that cool stuff, the history. I think that's a lot of what just draws me there. And again, Lake Superior, because you can catch anything. Right? There's not a species in Ontario that you can't really catch in Lake Superior. I mean, I'm sure there's largemouth bass in it too. We don't have any of that here, but I mean, every other species you can think of, I mean, we have in Lake Superior. So the options are endless, and every time you hook into a fish, there's that moment where you're wondering, what did I catch? Until you see it, and that's cool. And so every once in a while, you're rewarded with a really weird catch. Maybe you're fishing for pike, and all of a sudden you catch a giant steelhead, or like that's cool, or you're fishing for steelhead and you catch a giant walleye. Like that's cool too. And a lot of lakes, you don't have that opportunity. So it's like the mystery of the lake as well. Like it's the unknown. And it's so big, you'll never see it all. You can explore endlessly and never get bored. So that's where I fish mostly. It's Lake Superior and the rivers flowing into it for the most part.
That makes sense. That's pretty fascinating. I can see how it would be so captivating and just a place that you'd want to just keep returning back to when there's so much to explore and so much potential, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you'll never run out of places to fish or fish to catch or species to target or ways to target a certain species. So it's like a book that never ends. It's a good story that just goes on forever. So like inland lakes are fun, and I'm also a sucker for clear water. Like, I love being on the shore of a lake where I can see 25 feet down, or I can watch that trout I'm fighting come in for the last 40 feet, the silver sides flashing in the water. Like fishing in 3-4 feet of stained water, the fishing's got to be really good for me to like want to go fish in that type of scenario, right? Whereas Lake Superior, I can go and spend a week, catch 3 fish, and it's still totally worth it. I don't
It's-
have to get as much out of Lake Superior to be happy as I do other places because there's so much other things that the lake offers.
That honestly
were
sounds
just-
like the greatest fishing tourism pitch for Lake
Yeah.
Superior I might have ever heard. Like if
Oh,
there
you
was
know,
if
I
there was
love the
anybody
lake.
that's going to make a commercial about going to Lake Superior to fish, they just need to snip that recording right from this podcast and just play that, and anybody in the world who listens to that is going to be like, "Man, I want to go there. Holy moly."
And I don't know what the southern part of the lake is like, or even too far west of me. I mean, I'm kind of a homebody in the sense where, like, I travel maybe 4 or 5 hours east along Lake Superior and a couple hours west max. For the most part, though, there's so much that I have yet to even explore myself that, like, I don't know if the southern shores are like it, are like ours. Like, we're super rocky. We got tons of bedrock, and that's the predominant feature along our shoreline. Whereas I'm thinking the southern shores may be more shallower, you know, maybe more offering more weeds. I mean, we still have weed beds. You could still catch giant Lake Superior pike and weed beds all along the shore of Lake Superior here, but we got a lot of bedrock. So that offers up a lot of good, like, brook trout fishing because they're hugging those rocks, and there's a reason they call them coasters, eh? So I'm blessed. It's a beautiful place, and like I said, I love bedrock. I love pine trees, and there's nowhere better. You know, you're surrounded by both, and then you throw in all the fish, and throw in the fact it's so big, so you're often fishing by yourself. You don't have to worry about crowds. It's
Can you
truly
can
something.
you elaborate? Sorry, can you elaborate what you mean by coasters? I missed that.
Yeah, I've never
Yeah,
heard of that
so,
term
like,
before either.
Brook trout, you know, there's like river resident brook trout that, you know, are going to max out at 10, 14, 15, whatever their max is for that river size. But what in Lake Superior, we've got brook trout. And the reason they're called coasters is because for the most part, they just hug the coast the whole time. You're going to catch them close to shore. They're going to be up in under 20 feet of water. You can have great success casting from shore for them. So it's a really accessible way to get into the brook trout fishing. You can target some of these large brook trout in some of these rivers, but you usually have to do it closer to their spawning period in the fall before they close. But all summer long, you can catch giant 25-inch brook trout anywhere offshore for the most part. If you're by rock, I mean, they like rock. You can catch them anywhere. I mean, fish, they don't follow rules, right? For the most part, they have general guidelines that'll help you find a good area. But I mean, I've caught fish in spots they shouldn't be. But so the reason they're called coasters is just because they hug the coast for the most part, and it's just kind of a nickname that they've been given over time.
Cool.
I wonder if those same kind of principles apply to brook trout elsewhere, or if that's like a Lake Superior specific kind of thing.
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but
I've heard that term
Yeah.
before, but I associate it with, like, I can't remember what the name for like a migratory fish is, but a lot of trout migrate, and particularly between like salt and freshwater to spawn. And I thought maybe it had something to do with that. Like, do you guys know if there are brook trout that live in saltwater, or are they purely a freshwater fish?
I believe there are in New
I'm not
Brunswick.
100% I know
I
char,
think.
right? I'm pretty sure char live in the ocean and come into the rivers to spawn. And essentially, a brook trout's not a trout; it's a char.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, in a sense, related to a species of char, like the Arctic char, and there may be more that I'm unfamiliar with. So there's a relation there. So there's some salt water going on with some of them, but our coasters, they will enter the rivers to spawn. But with Lake Superior being freshwater, I don't know if that's anything specific as to why they're called coasters. For the most part, I believe it's just a behavior thing. They just tend to stick to the coast. Like I said, you can catch them in deeper water, but for the most part, they're under 15, 20 feet of water, and they're hugging rocks, and bedrock, and they're just digging around for food, just cruising the shore. Like, you'll sometimes be standing there, and you'll see a 25-inch brook trout just swim past in front of you, and you can drop your lure in front of them, whatever you have, and they don't care one bit. They just swim right past. Sometimes they'll bump it with their nose as they pass. But it's a perfect example of why they're called that. They just cruise. And you can see that fairly often, and you can do that because the water's so clear, right? A lot of other lakes,
Wild.
you may not be able to see it as well. So
Okay, can you stop, please? Like, we're all jealous now. So
Yeah,
can we move
man.
on?
Yeah, well, hey, come on up.
Like
Okay,
I
yeah,
caught
that's
my
the plan.
first brook trout like right before the winter hit
I know everyone's
with
always telling me,
Ben.
like, man, come down to Southern Ontario. I'm like, oh, you come up here.
Yeah. And like my brook trout was like, I don't know, what would you say that was, Ben? Like a 10, 12 inch brook trout?
Yeah, maybe.
And I was like, man, this brook
Giant.
trout's huge. You know,
Well,
I thought I was doing all right.
there's still rivers around here where if you catch a 15-inch brook trout, that's a trophy brook trout for that river, right? And you have to think of everything from a water body perspective. Two different water bodies can have two different trophy, in my eyes, two different trophy classes of fish, right? One river, a trophy might be 10 inches for that river. Another river, like the Nipigon River, I mean, you catch so many 20-inch brook trout that's almost become, the 16 to 21-inch brook trout range is the norm for the Nipigon River. Whereas other people are paying thousands of dollars to go on trips up to Newfoundland and stuff to catch fish that size. So it's really easy for us to take it for granted. That's why I talk so highly of Lake Superior, because I got to remind myself every once in a while how lucky I really am to be able to live here, to be born in Nipigon. It's over 100 years. It's still holding the world record brook trout. So is it going to get broken? Maybe, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon.
So speaking of big brook trout, our buddy Jake asked in the chat there, what's your PB Brookie?
Mine's 24 inches measured on a tape. I've caught brook trout out of season that they were out of season and I didn't put a tape on them. That I'm confident were 26, and they came from the Nipigon River too. And
Wow.
I wanted to measure it, but it's out of season, and I didn't. It's just you just can't sometimes, right? And that's the fish story. You tell everybody, they call you a liar, and you say, yeah, okay, whatever. Maybe I am lying, but most fish stories out there, I'm done trying to figure out whether they're true or not. I like the fact that fishermen exaggerate a little bit. It adds a little mystery to the stories. I mean, nowadays with pictures and stuff, like if you really caught a fish that big and landed it and it was legal and everything, you got a picture.
Yeah.
And if you don't, well, maybe it just wasn't safe to take a picture, and maybe you did the right thing, or maybe you're lying. But whatever. Who cares? That's fishing, right? Like, it's been that way forever. We're not going to change it now.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, actually, and that actually like segues into something else we wanted to talk to you about, and it was the impact of social media on fishing. And obviously, we live in very different areas. So, Southern Ontario, these waters are pressured like you wouldn't believe to begin with. And then with the introduction of social media and like how it became popular on YouTube and other platforms, for sure, it's got like a lot of these places are getting hit even harder. So like, what have you noticed up your way, like in terms of changes?
Well, I mean, over the last, I'd say 5 years predominantly, I've noticed social media really start to get big. I mean, there's always been fishing pages, and there's always been people that post their fishing stuff. I've been posting fishing stuff on both Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, for as long as they've been around. But over the last 5 years, and definitely over the last 2 years, people have had all kinds of free time, and they're trying to find ways to fill it, and they're picking up fishing rods, and they're picking up cameras, and people want to share what they do with other people, and that's great, and that's fine. But you got to be careful, because you got to remember that people are seeing what you're putting out there. Some people are actually paying attention and listening to you, and not all of them. I mean, some people probably think you're an idiot, but there are people out there that take what you say and they value your opinion. So if you're gonna get out there in the public eye, you need to be careful about how you present yourself. Now, that doesn't mean cater, just to the people. Like, you still need to be you, right? But understand that, especially if your following is growing and you're having a bigger audience, you kind of, with that audience growing, so does your responsibility. I mean, you need to make sure you're putting out a good message, right? And be humble too. Just because you happen to have more followers than somebody, it doesn't mean that your opinion's more valuable than theirs. So, approach everybody as if You know, you're some random person you ran into on the river, and you're just going to shoot the ship for a couple hours. It's that. And another thing to touch on too would be being careful about not just your opinions and the things you say, but also the things you post. Now, especially like you were saying, the waters that you fish are super heavily pressured. So if you happen to find some little gem, you know, a little creek or a river or a lake that a lot of people haven't figured out yet, and you've got thousands of followers and you make a post about it, how awesome the fishing is, and then, you know, 5 people ask where the lake is and you tell all 5 people, and then 50 people share your post, and the next time you go to the lake, you're pissed off because it's busy. So I think in those situations when you've got fewer places to fish, you've got to protect it even more. Now up here, we have a lot of lakes, like, I mean, endless. Like I don't, within an hour of Thunder Bay, I couldn't name all the lakes. Like there's thousands. So, and in that sense, I feel like you can be a little less protective because there's more water to go around. But at the same time, not all water's equal. You know, like water close to town, or more specifically, like let's say rivers in Thunder Bay, you need to be careful about those kind of situations because anybody can just hop off their couch, drive 4 minutes to get to that spot and fish it. It's easy for them to fish it. It's easy for people to exploit it. Whereas, you know, if you're out in some back lake that takes 3 hours to get into, you could tell all the people you want. You're going to run into a handful of people who are going to want to put in the work to do it. So I think a lot of it just comes down to, like, look at the water body you're fishing. Ask yourself if it's already pressured or if it has the potential to become overly pressured and quickly. And if you think it can be, you know, if it can be ruined, then don't post it. Or post those fish, but hide the background. There's all kinds of ways that you can still take pictures of your fish, document your trip without having to give away the background. But on the flip side, there's lakes where, you know, some people say you should never burn a spot or you should never tell people where you go. And you know, if I'm down in my marina in Thunder Bay fishing for pike, just casting, you know, daredevils offshore, catching pike, I don't really care about telling other people that because like Lake Superior is a big lake. You can catch those fish almost anywhere off the shoreline in Thunder Bay. So opportunities like that, like you need to protect some opportunities, but you still need to give people who are new to fishing somewhere to go. Right? Yeah. Like you can't just protect it all. Like, yeah, they need to go out and discover things on their own. But I mean, if you think back to when you started fishing, you know, somebody gives you one spot, you go there, you catch a bunch of fish, you start building your confidence, and then you get the ability to go, okay, I'm going to start exploring. I want to find more spots like that. But until you really experience, you know, okay, what catching fish is like, until you catch the bug, you know, until you get hooked, it's hard to find those spots. So it does help to have community spots you can share with people. But again, it comes down to just, you got to look at the water body you're going to post about, or you're not going to post about, and ask yourself, is it already too pressured? Can it handle more people? And will people be willing to go fish it? Is it easy to get to, or is it hard to get to? So there's all kinds of things you need to ask yourself before you post about spots. And if you're not sure, just don't post it. Show your friends that you trust. I mean, they're the ones who are going to care about your fish anyway, right? I mean, you got a couple likes on Instagram, but, you know, sometimes you got to
do it for the gram. You got to do it for the gram.
The gram.
Everyone says do it for the gram, you know, and a lot of people have even, you know, mentioned that, brought that up to me. It's like, but if you've seen the amount of fish I've never taken a picture of, just because it wasn't fit for the situation, the shoreline was rough, the fish already looked beat up, or the fish was out of season, or the fish was undersized, or whatever, right? There's all kinds of reasons that you're not going to be able to get a good picture of that fish. So, I mean, I fish a lot. If I only caught the fish I posted, that'd be like a fish every 2 weeks. That wouldn't be that great of a track record, right? So, well, we're spoiled up here, you know. That's not a good track record up here, anyway. So
I know what you're saying.
Those are all great points and great things to consider when you're sharing a body of water. It's definitely something that, it's certainly something that I know we all struggle with when we're about to name a spot or show the background. I mean, there are tricks that we do sometimes and that we use, but don't want to give those away. But yeah, you do definitely have to be careful, like you said. Like you reach a lot of different people.
And I think
And-
rivers too, you need to be extra careful because there's a lot less, available shoreline on a river
That's right.
versus the ability to fish a lake. You could have a boat, and then your options are huge. But on a river, and it's true for the old saying, right? 90% of the fish are in 10% of the lake.
Yeah.
Well, that's true for rivers too. I mean, if you learn a river well, you're going to realize that the majority of those fish are in a select few spots, especially if they're, migratory fish like steelhead or salmon. And if you can get to those spots and you know where to fish those spots, you can catch all kinds of fish. And someone, 15 feet downriver from you might get the odd fish that's moving up between those prime spots. But there's a lot less good fishable water on a river. So you need to be extra careful with that too.
You don't want to end up with a situation like Port Hope or something like that during the salmon run.
Yeah, like I've seen some of those videos from down south, and it's like combat fishing. Like, sure, I don't even understand how people do that. Like, you couldn't pay me $1,000 to go do that. I wouldn't do it.
Same.
And I couldn't imagine what it's like for the fish swimming up that river.
Just to have like 1,000 lures, lines like spider webs in the water.
90% of the fish are fouled. So now you've got one guy fighting a tailhook salmon 300 meters downstream. Everyone else has got to pull their lines out. Of course, he doesn't know how to fight it, so he chases it 300 meters downstream. You can't just run after the fish and not gain anything. Otherwise, you're not doing anything. You're not accomplishing anything if you're just chasing the fish with the same amount of length between you and the fish. You got to be gaining on it. And in those situations, just cut your line. If you got 300 feet of line out, cut it well before that. You don't want that fish to have 300 feet of line hanging off of it. But it's nasty. I don't know how people do it. And some of these people enjoy it. I've seen fist fights. It's not like that here.
No, I don't want to take away from anybody who does enjoy that kind of fishing. To each their own. These are just our opinions, but I'm with you. Like, it's just not my cup of tea to be fishing shoulder to shoulder with however many tens or like 100 other people all competing for the same fish in a very small area. It's just not. It's not why I fish. Like, you know what I mean? That takes away. Yeah. It takes away all of the allure of being out in nature, like kind of away from everybody else, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like a busy pool here is 2 or 3 guys fishing it. Like you show up to a pool and there's one guy in the pool and you're like, damn, like that's the norm here. Now it's getting busier for sure. And I'm sure like the last 2 years hasn't helped. But, when I first started steelheading, I would get up fairly early and I'd be at the river hours before anyone else. And now I'm getting up even earlier and I get to the river and there's 3, 4, 5 people ahead of me already. So people are catching on, and
you have you, I think I remember you saying that you just recently started float fishing.
Yeah.
So before that, because you use eggs and like skein and stuff like that, right? Were you just doing that on like conventional gear before?
No, before I was float fishing, I was strictly fly fishing for all trout and salmon, like steelhead and everything like that. So that was all flies, egg flies, and beads. I never started using like the actual eggs and spawn and skein and stuff like that until I got my center pin.
Okay, so before we get too far into this, because you lost me, I don't know anything about fly fishing, and this is a good segue into that. But you have to explain what you're talking about because I don't know anything about like float fishing or the eggs. I'm assuming you're talking about roe, and skein is like the little bag that it's tied in. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, the skein is how it comes naturally out of the fish, where all the eggs are still attached together.
Okay.
So that's the skein part. If you catch that salmon or trout, whatever you're taking the eggs from later on in the egg development period, the eggs will actually become loose. And that's when you've seen you can see the eggs streaming out of the fish, like single eggs. Okay. So when you're float fishing, that's one of the more common baits is real eggs. Whereas on fly fishing, because it would be you can definitely fish eggs on a fly rod, but it's gonna be, you're gonna lose more eggs. Like the casting of a float rod is a lot more gentle on the eggs and everything, and eggs are pretty delicate. So like the fly rod, while it can be done, typically I'm more so bottom bouncing with the fly rod too. And sorry, where was I even going with that?
You
The
were talking
difference
about,
between float
fly
fishing
with-
and fly fishing.
Yeah, so like with fly fishing, for the most part, I bottom bounce with a fly rod. So when I say the word fly fishing, I'm using a fly rod to bounce a heavyish weight along the bottom of the river. So when I'm fishing for steelhead using a fly rod, the fly fishing aspect ends kind of at my gear. The technique I'm using or the way I'm casting isn't traditionally a fly fishing technique, because I'm using weight on the line, whereas the fly cast kind of is used to propel a weightless fly forward. Like just normal conventional gear, you're using the weight of the lure to pull the line off the reel. In fly fishing, you're using the weight of the line to pull the lure through the air. So you're casting the line, you're actually casting your line, and then the lure will follow that line out. So that's the difference between fly fishing and conventional. Is conventional, your lure pulls the line. Fly fishing, the line pulls the lure.
That is
so as you get like a fly cast, that fly line goes out behind you, it straightens out, and then when you cast it back forward, it's going to create a loop. It's hard to show with my hand, but it'll create a loop. Your fly will be here, and your fly will be following over, and as that fly line unfolds, your fly will keep going and then land on the water. So, I mean, but fly fishing, a lot of people, when they think of fly fishing, they think tiny dry flies for trout in a river, right? But it's so much more than that. I mean, when I picked up my fly rod, right away I started fishing for walleye, pike, salmon, bass, everything, right? Like you can tie 12-inch pike flies, you can tie the tiny little trout flies. Anything you can fish for with conventional gear, you can fish for with a fly rod, and effectively too. I mean, you can get sinking lines or sink tips if you want to fish for walleye, smallmouth bass, no problem. A lot of guys, and then when you get into the fly fishing, then it gets even more complicated because then you got like, you could swing your flies across a river. There's a lot of guys that do like the spey casting, and they swing like a streamer across the current in a river. Other guys are going to be fishing dry flies. Some guys are fishing little nymphs that are going to resemble little insects hatching in the river and stuff like that. And you know, it's easy to get into. It's fairly cheap. For a couple $100, you can have your setup. You don't need all the crazy gear. You know, you can go out and if you really wanted to, you can go get a Walmart setup for $100. And at the very least, that'll tell you whether or not it's something you're going to want to do. You know, whether or not you're going to want to continue to do it. $100 investment that you end up not liking is a lot better than spending $500 on a setup and then having to sell it later on for $200 because you don't like fly fishing.
This is all really great information for anybody watching or listening who, like me, is interested in trying fly fishing.
It's just different. It's not that it's better. Now, I'm not gonna lie. Once you do it, it is more fun. It's more fun to read.
It is better.
It's better. No, but I don't want to. It's not that it's better. It's I enjoy it more. Like the casting, you feel everything, right? So. Especially when you're learning to cast a fly rod, at first, you're kind of just going through the motions. You're not sure if you're doing it right until the first time you do it right. And then because everything comes together, like the rod loads up properly, your line, you get a nice tight loop on your fly cast, and then you can just feel it and you go, oh, okay, that's what this is. And the fact that you can enjoy the casting so much takes a lot of the pressure off when you're out fishing. Even if you're not fishing, sometimes if the fishing sucks, I'll take my fly off and just stand there for an hour and just see how far I can cast, because it's fun. It's enjoyable. And again, you aren't limited. A lot of people think fly fishing limits them, but it doesn't. I mean, there's a learning curve like anything else, right? Yeah, you're not going to go out and catch as many fish as you're used to, the first time out fly fishing. You might, you catch 20 bass on your conventional gear. That's awesome. you're probably not going to catch 20 bass your first time fly fishing, and you have to be okay with that. You're going to have to be okay with putting in the time where you're going to catch less fish, but eventually those numbers will get back up, right? And then you'll be catching just as much, if not in some cases more fish on the fly rod. You know, sometimes I'm out with a buddy and we're fishing for walleye and he's just slaying it and I'm not catching much at all. And then something flips and all of a sudden my fly rod's the one putting all the fish in the boat. So it's just, ultimately, it's just another tool, you know, and as a fisherman, I think you want to be as versatile as possible. The more tools you have, the more opportunities you're presenting yourself with. And, you know, with more opportunities comes more fish. You know, you can't catch a fish without your line in the water. And sometimes they want, you know, conventional gear. Other times they want to take a fly off the top. And it's really hard to keep a tiny fly that's weightless on top of the water, never mind cast it out 40 feet. Like, you know, like there's things they've come out with, like those little bobbers you can put on conventional gear that kind of add enough weight so you can cast a fly out and they float. So they'll float and then 4 feet off, you'll have some line and you'll have your fly there. So you can still kind of fish a dry fly with a spinning reel or whatever you want, but it's not going to be as effective. And you don't have to get all these tools right away, but, you know, eventually there will be a situation where a fly rod will do better. And it's just a matter, do you have the tool or not? I mean, it's better to have and not need than need and not have, right?
So you heard it from the man. If you don't have a fly rod and you don't know how to use one, better get one and learn how to use it.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's not going to make or break your fishing career, but and a lot of people get into it just because it's not necessarily that they get bored with conventional fishing. It's just that they want something else, right? An additional challenge. And it opens up a whole new world because you have fly tying all of a sudden. And I mean, if you're a creative person, you can remortgage your house getting into fly tying. Like, you know, it's addicting. And if it's something you're really passionate about too, then you're gonna fall in love with fly tying. It's a great thing to do in the off season, right? If you're not an ice fisherman, you can tie flies all winter. So it's just, you know, it's broadening your horizons in a sense. That's all you're really doing, is you're exposing yourself to more and different types of fishing, and you learn lots. So yeah, fly fishing is fun.
I picked up a fly rod a couple years ago. I think I've talked to you about it, Brodie, but when I first got it, I thought I knew enough to try it, and it was like snags, tangles, knots, losing flies, and not catching anything. And I went out a bunch, and I was like I want to like this, but it's just frustrating. And I actually put it away for a while. I didn't touch it because it was just like, you know, where I was fishing, all the pressure, I was having a hard time catching fish anyways. And then I'm like putting this additional challenge on myself. And I was like, okay, not right now. But when I moved out to where I'm at now in the Kawarthas, fishing opportunities became a lot better. So I was like, you know, maybe I should try this again. And I did. And I used it a bunch this past year. I'll take my kids down to the lake, like right at the end of my road here, and I'll take the fly rod just to practice. And you're right. Like when you described, you know, at first you're like, okay, well, I'm getting my line out there and I'm getting the fly out there. Maybe this is right. But when you actually get the motion down and you understand like how to intentionally place your fly where you want it, it's a cool feeling. And you're right. It is fun to cast. So I did enjoy it a lot more this year. And I plan on using it more next year. But like, yeah, I just bought like I don't know, it was like a $200 set from Amazon, and it came with the rod, the reel, the line, tippet. It came with a bunch of flies, and a couple leaders, like everything you need to get started, basically. Relatively inexpensive, and it's done fine for me, to be honest. It's not great, but that rod has a lifetime warranty, and I've broken 2 tips on it now, and they've replaced them.
Okay. You're getting your money's worth at least.
For sure. Yeah.
So I have a question about something you mentioned, Adam, specifically, and that's the leaders. So obviously the line that you use on a fly rod is like a special kind of weighted line, right? But when it comes, you're obviously not going to tie your hook to that. So Adam mentioned the leaders. Can you use just like regular fishing line as a leader, or is it like a special type of leader material that you have to use with a fly fishing line? And can you tie like a regular leader kind of knot to put them together, or would you use like a barrel swivel, or like how would that go?
Okay. Well, you're definitely not going to be tying your fly directly to the fly line. Now, that fly line is usually going to be about a 90 to 100-foot length. It's going to cost you between, I mean, you can get a cheap line for $30, but it's a cheap line. Your average line is going to cost between $50 to $100 Canadian. So when you get that line, with any industry, if there's a way they can complicate it further to make more money, they're going to complicate it further to make more money, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to your leader, now if you're fishing tiny dry flies where you need that fly to, really gently present itself on the river, then yeah, I would suggest you go out and get yourself what's called a tapered leader. So they're pre-made usually, and they come in different lengths, but for the most common length is 9 feet. And it's going to be pre-tied on one end. It's going to have a loop already, and your fly line should, most of them nowadays come with a welded loop. So there's going to be a little loop welded into the PVC coating of your fly line. And you essentially just attach those two loops together. So you now have your fly line here, and you got your loop attached with loop-to-loop connections. Some people will use other knots, but because they come with loops, I run just the loop-to-loop. And then you've got your 9-foot leader. But because every time you change your fly, you don't want to have to cut back that leader, right? Because some of these leaders are $10 a piece. So instead of cutting back that leader, what you do now is on the end of your leader, tie another section of line. Would be your tippet, right? So you would run however long, 10 to 30 inch, whatever you need for your conditions or whatever your style of fishing. And you would tie that to your leader. And that's what you would cut back every time you need to retie a fly or you get snagged. Now, as that tippet gets shorter, you take the tippet off, tie a new tippet on. So you're going to lose an inch off your leader every time you go through your tippet. But that tippet might take you an entire day to go through, or it might take you weeks if you don't lose any flies or whatever, right? But do you need that? I'm a firm believer, no. 99% of the time, I am running a 7 to 9 foot length of level monofilament or fluorocarbon. And that's it. Like if I'm bass fishing or pike fishing or steelhead fishing or salmon fishing, I'm running just straight mono for the most part. Usually I run Maxima Ultra Green almost exclusively.
Do you mean you attach that to your fly line? You just run like a mono leader to your fly line?
I'll go mono right off my fly line. And if I'm swinging a fly like a streamer across the river, then I'll tie that streamer directly to that. And the idea behind a taper in a leader is that it's going to transfer the energy from the stiff end of where it meets your fly line. And as it unfurls and it's thinner, as it gets closer to the top, it's going to go present it slower. So as it unrolls, it's going to do it slowly, and it's going to present that fly in the end on a really light line, so it's going to land gently. But if you're not worried about presentation, like how it's hitting the water, then I don't think it's a big concern. And I think it's a lot of it's just a way for them to make more money. Now, I'm not saying they're making unnecessary products. They very well may be necessary, but in very specialized situations. I haven't bought a leader that's tapered in, I don't know, 6-7 years. I think I've maybe bought a handful of them. And even if you need a tapered leader, you can tie your own at home too. If you get 4 or 5 different, tests lines, and you just work your way down, tying, from stronger down to lighter, and you can have your own leaders. But if you're fishing for anything bigger than 14-inch brook trout, I don't think it's a big issue. If anything, you'd be better off just downsizing your line to a lighter test than you would be to be using expensive tapered leaders all the time.
That's great to know, because I just assumed that I needed the tapered leader and the tippet, and so I bought those things.
I spent a lot of money on stuff that I never needed, but it's because when you get into it and you just type in, like, what do I need for fly fishing? They just list everything you'll probably need. But, I mean, fishing here is different than fishing in, like, I know some river in Utah where you're going for like trophy rainbow trout that are only hitting size 26,
Very
dry.
specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But up here where I am, I mean, our rivers aren't super clear either. They're usually a little stained or tea colored anyway. So I'm not too worried about my line or my presentation. I'm worried about my presentation, but I'm not always worried about the way I'm delivering that fly. I just think it's using a tapered leader up here all the time would be overkill and unnecessary.
And those are the kinds of things I think you learn with experience, right? Like you understand as you gain experience what's necessary and what's not.
Yeah, and when you've broken like 3 liters in one day and you're like, well, there's $30. You're like, you start asking yourself, can I do it cheaper? Because fishing isn't cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And we do need to try to save money where we can. Because it's so easy to spend a lot of money on fishing stuff.
Oh yeah.
So when you can save some money, you should probably do it. And that's not saying, don't buy things you need, but don't buy things you don't.
Solid advice.
Yeah.
You hear that, Ben?
Yes, Adam.
I've never been much of a gear guy myself, so it's easy for me to have that attitude. I understand a lot of guys feel like if they don't have the tapered leader, they're not prepared, or better to have. Like I said, better to have and not need than need and not have. But I just feel like I've been doing it for so long, I haven't run into a situation yet where I've thought to myself, a tapered leader would be nice. So if after 5 years I haven't run into that need, I don't feel it's necessary for me. Maybe other guys feel they can't catch a fish without a tapered leader, then use a tapered leader. If it helps your confidence, then go ahead. Absolutely, do it. Whatever helps give you the edge, right? And sometimes a little extra confidence is what you need. It might push you a little further that day, make you stay a little longer, catch that fish you wouldn't have caught if you left half an hour ago.
Yeah.
But I don't use them. I don't need them. I don't think most people do.
Well, and that's great. I mean, that's great advice because, as someone who's trying to learn about fly fishing, for me, I'm watching videos on YouTube, I'm reading about it, and I've never heard anyone explain it like that, and there's this, maybe it's just me and my idea of what a stereotypical fly fisherman is, but it's like this, pompous, oh, well, if you're not using the proper tippet, then you won't catch any fish. Ha ha ha. There's a lot of that, but I find that with fishing generally. So when you're online, you're reading through articles, people are telling you, they're like, oh, you got to have this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing, and you think like nothing. You're like, okay, I guess I got to have those things.
They're not hitting a size 24 fly, but they're hitting a 26. It's like you start psyching yourself out, and you start to say, this is way too complicated for me. I don't want to have to tie 50,000 different kinds of flies to catch fish. I don't want to have to spend $5,000 on fly rods and tippets and fly lines and fly dressings, and the list goes on. You can spend so much money on fly fishing stuff. It's ridiculous, but you need almost none of it. I mean, you need a fly rod, a fly reel, a fly line, and some clear stuff to put at the end. Whatever, mono, fluoro, whatever you got. As long as it's not old, then you're good to go. You'll if you put yourself in a good position or in a good, if there's fish around, you'll be able to catch them. If someone's telling me that their leader is why they're not catching fish, I mean, now that, not to say, leader thickness might have an issue, right? Someone's trying to run 20-pound test in a clear river trying to catch little trout. The guy running 4-pound test or 2-pound test is probably going to do better. But I think people put too much emphasis on their gear when we all know the fish doesn't know what's in your hand, right? Like, they don't know that you don't have a $500 Sage fly rod. They don't know that you didn't spend $200 on a fly line. So as long as you can get that fly out 20 feet, 30 feet, that's going to cover you 95% of your fly fishing if you fish rivers, for sure. just don't don't psych yourself out. It's just another type of fishing. That's all it is. It's just like anything else, right?
You're breaking down barriers here, Brodie.
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
think
the internet can handle what's going on here.
getting some sage wisdom from Brodie on.
It's not everybody who fly fishes has had this attitude, but there's definitely been like an elitist, classist attitude that's gone along with fly fishing, right? Like the rich white dude in the 20s, they were the only ones that fly fished, apparently. You know, and if you see like old movies and stuff, it was always a rich thing, like golfing. You know, like I always try to compare it to golfing. Whereas at one point, that wasn't something that, you know, people that were down on their luck were able to do. Whereas now, like, I'm trying to just show people that fly fishing isn't something that is complicated. It's not something you need to be scared of. You can be catching fish and casting a fly rod well, like good enough, within 30 minutes of instruction. Like, that's all it takes. You don't have to spend weeks of not catching fish, but, you know, it's really easy to do things wrong in the first place and start bad habits. And that's the worst thing about fly fishing is everybody wants to do it on their own. And I did that too. And there was things I did that easily hindered me and held me back by months of learning. And once you figure those things out, and it's trial and error, right? You read a bunch of articles that tell you to do one thing, and then you realize that, oh, that doesn't actually work. Or it doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the best thing you can do is if you want to get into fly fishing and you do enjoy it, but you're not catching fish and you're getting frustrated, is don't ever leave your house with another type of rod until you're comfortable with that fly rod. Don't bring your spinning rod. Leave it at home because you're going to put that fly rod down and you're going to pick that spinning rod up and you're going to start catching fish because you're confident again. You're comfortable. And then you're going to go, oh, fly rod sucks.
Brodie's taking us to school today.
I've done both of those things.
It's not for everybody, you know, and some people just can't get it. I mean, you need to there's timing, right? Your fly cast, you can have it 95% right, but that 5% that's wrong, your entire cast will fall apart. Everything has to be done. It's like a symphony, right? Like your back cast, you got to wait the perfect right amount of time before you start going forward. And if you don't wait that right amount of time, it's going to suck the energy out of your cast. And then you're going to try to recover on your forward cast. Before you know, you're going to have a pile of line at your feet. So it's just be patient. One of the best pieces of advice with fly casting is when you bring that fly rod back, when you think you're ready to go forward again, wait. Like wait till you feel that rod bend and that rod load up. If you can't feel that line pulling that rod backwards, you're not ready to go forwards. A lot of people think it's like a whipping. Like I've actually seen people take a fly rod and try to make like a whip crack sound with it. And I'm like, no, like you don't whip the line out there. It's all a smooth motion, right? And you're just building up energy in your rod and you're transferring it to that line and then to your fly, and that's how you cast your stuff out. But it's all smooth. Like there's 85-year-old women who can still cast 100 feet, like Joan Wolfe, I think her name's Joan Wolfe or something like that. She's a world famous fly instructor, and she'll go up to guys that are 40 who are just trying to like strong arm their fly rod out. Like it's like the stronger you are, the farther it's going to go. And she walks up and she's bombing casts out twice as far as them because it's technique. It's like a golf swing, right? You don't have to be strong to hit a golf ball far. You need to have good technique. And I compare that to fly casting. It's technique.
It totally looks elegant when you see a fly fisher, a fly angler.
It's a beautiful thing.
Rod.
It's like art.
The line, everything. You can see, it's very graceful.
Yeah, it is. And that's, it's a beautiful thing and it's fun to do. And like I said, when you get that perfect cast, it's like the world's perfect at that moment. It just feels so good. And that cast lays out perfectly in front of you. Your line, your leader unrolls, your fly line's exactly where you wanted it to. That's when you're like, all right, this is for me. That's when you discover whether or not fly fishing's for you or not. Because if that doesn't put a smile on your face, that first good fly cast, then it's probably not for you. Because you should get happy at that moment. It's when everything finally comes together.
Wow, that was a lot. That was a lot to unpack, but that's some. I've been trying to find a way to segue into another another part of the conversation, but I didn't want to interrupt that beautiful discussion that you were having. It's I just, as much as I love
I
ice
keep
fishing,
forgetting that like I'm part of the podcast. I'm just listening to Brodie talk. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, that's
this
interesting.
is the Brodie show tonight. That was great.
I'm
That was
digging
great.
it.
I feel amped up because about the summer. Maybe this will be the summer that I pick up my first fly rod. I've been wanting to do it since I started fishing like seriously only a couple of years ago, and maybe this will be the one.
Yeah, go bass fishing. It's a blast on a fly rod, and you can usually catch a few fish, some top water action.
Yeah.
Just for I just want to finish this one little thought here. You can't troll with a fly rod, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
Yeah, I've done it.
All right, so before
it's not ideal for sure, but I've done it. Yeah.
Before we segue into the next part that I want to talk to you about, we do have some questions in the comments from our live audience that I want to address. Canadian Shieldman Jake asked NWO to elaborate on his love of husky jerks and what fish and conditions he uses them for.
Ooh. I fish husky jerks for everything. I mean, steelhead, salmon, pike, smallmouth bass, walleye. I mean, mainly those 5. But what the conditions I use them in, I just start with a husky jerk, and if the fish bite, then I keep using it.
So
and if they don't, but
do you use them on a fly rod?
No.
Oh, okay.
So fly rod, you are somewhat limited to what you can cast with a fly rod. So all my husky jerk casting is done with a traditional either bait cast or spinning rod. But
okay.
I'm really picky with my colors too. Like husky jerk is going to be on my rod if I'm fishing husky jerks 95% of the time, because it works great in stained water. It works great in clear water. I've just never found a fish that won't eat a husky jerk. I mean, jerk baits in general are just great baits. There's something triggering about the way that, the jerk pause, and you can just get so much action out of them. And a lot of it just confidence too, right? I've been fishing a jerk bait my whole life, and it's always been a fire tiger jerk bait, and I've never really ran into a situation where if the fish were biting, it wasn't going to get me fish.
Cool. So something you mentioned earlier was fishing clear water, and you just kind of mentioned color, and I wanted to ask you, I mean, we've got Lake Ontario right here. We've got tons of clear water as well. And I find like clear water is typically a little bit more tricky to fish, right? That's the kind of general consensus. So what kind of colors do you like to throw for clear water?
Well, it's going to depend a lot on species too. Like brook trout, I find they'll definitely hit a silver spoon, but I find they won't shy away from bright colors. When I'm casting into Lake Superior, I really just work through them all. I mean, I'll start off with just a spoon I like that I've done well with. And let's say it's a chartreuse spoon. If I'm not getting anything on that chartreuse, I'll just start working my way over to something more natural, right? Working my way over to silver, go from chartreuse to maybe an orange to a green. Then I'll try start going half and half, maybe green and silver. And some days they are just keying in on all silver spoons, or some days like an all brass spoon or an all copper spoon is going to give you is going to get you more fish. So a lot of it's with Lake Superior and brook trout, because they can be in a lot of cases a little finicky. I just keep changing until you find what works.
Cool.
But if it wasn't brook trout, clear water, I'd be leaning generally towards more natural colors, silvers and blues, maybe silver and green, stuff like that. That's for like more salmon and steelhead. Like, I mean, it's hard to go wrong with a silver and blue spoon. I mean, that's going to represent the majority of the bait fish you're going to see out in Lake Superior or Lake Ontario, most likely, right? Your smelts, your Cisco, any other bait fish for the most part. It's got silver sides and a blue or a black back, right? So,
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a guy, if it's not working, I'll just switch lures up. But in general, clear water, start natural and see how that goes. Brook trout, when I'm fishing for big brook trout, like the coasters, I compare it to bass fishing. Like you can use bigger, noisier baits, brighter baits. Like they can be fairly aggressive when they want to be, and it's not like they're gonna shy away from your pink tube jig. Like you can crush brook trout on a pink tube jig or maybe a white tube jig or a silver spoon.
Not around here.
No,
No, you can't. No way.
yeah.
No
I mean,
way.
up here, yeah, like we don't worry about size. I mean, you can be fishing big baits for brook trout here, and they
Wow.
just crush them. Yeah, I
That's
mean,
cool.
lots of people I know use tube jigs exclusively for brook trout, like big 4 or 5 inch tube jigs.
Mm.
Like again, they're different.
Wow.
It's a different breed of brook trout, right? Like these are.
There's a
big.
picture. There's a picture on your Instagram of a brook trout with a big white tube hanging out of its mouth, I think.
That would have been the lake trout.
Oh, okay, lake trout. Never mind.
Yeah, I know, but
I thought it was a brookie.
fished on the Nipigon River, especially when I was younger. Me and a friend of mine, we fished white tube jigs almost exclusively, and it was neat because you could see the tube moving through the water because it was white. So you got to see all those strikes that if you were using a darker lure or you would have otherwise missed. And there's nothing cooler than seeing a fish strike your lure, right? Like
Yeah.
we're getting a
Yeah.
popping, right? Well, seeing fish do anything is fun, right? So,
Yeah.
and yeah,
I think
those
that's why I
white
love
tubes make it
pike
real
fishing.
interesting.
So
There's another.
there's one more
Go ahead,
question there. Kala, I hope I'm saying that right. Kala Moses. Brodie, what's your biggest goal for? What's your biggest goal you're looking to accomplish this upcoming open water season?
I don't know. You know, I never really put too much thought into it. The thing is, like, I fished long enough where the majority of the fish, like brook trout, and I've caught fairly large fish of most species. So like I could set some like somewhat unrealistic personal goals. Like I want to catch a 29-inch brook trout or a 28-inch brook trout. I mean, that'll probably never happen, but it's like most of the length goals aside, outside of just freakishly large fish that I'll probably never catch. I would say just, I don't know. He's kind of stumped me there. What are my goals, eh?
That's
I don't
okay.
know. Get more people into fishing, I guess. That's always a good goal, is just expose more people to
Definitely.
the good sides of fishing, right?
That's an admirable goal, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of been the goal behind the majority of what I've done is I'm trying to share the fishing world with other people and expose them to parts of it they've never seen or maybe didn't even know existed before. You know, like the camaraderie, the friendships, and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's amazing how many, people over the age of 60, especially like women who follow me on Instagram and message me all the time, just loving the stuff I post, and they think it's so cool, and they've never
That's
seen a lot
fantastic.
of this kind of stuff, right? And because I've kept my page fairly family friendly, and it's easy for them to approach my page and not feel out of place or intimidated or anything like that. So just get more people into it. Not necessarily just young people, but just get more people into the hobby. Like kids who fish don't grow up old ladies, right?
That's
Is that
true.
true? Is that a fact?
I'm not stating facts here. It's probably not true, but
No, I think you're onto something.
yeah. No, I think that's a fair goal. I mean, sure, I'd love to catch, giant fish. I'd love to catch a 46-inch pike. I'd love to catch a 26-inch brook trout in season. A 40-inch lake trout would be cool. A 6-pound smallmouth, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But, it's been a long time since I've kind of made those kind of goals. Not because I don't want to catch those fish, but I'm like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I'm not going to change the way I fish because I've decided I want to catch a big bass this summer. I'd be fishing the same spots I'd be fishing anyway. It's not like I ever go out and pick the second best spot. So if the big fish is there, it's there. If it's not, it's not.
So, are there any techniques or any new lures or baits that you want to try out this season?
Focus. Well, I want to do more with the center pin, and I'm more interested in getting into two-hand fly fishing. So like switch rods or a spay rod, and just bombing out those giant casts and swinging those big streamers. The thing is, we have some rivers that allow you and have like the water conditions to do that, but we don't have a lot of rivers that allow for great swinging opportunities. So for people that don't know, swinging a fly, I guess I'll explain. If the river's flowing from me to you, you're just casting a lure out to one, or the fly out to one side, and you're just holding your line and you're just letting that lure swing across the current. So as a fish comes up, he's going to see it swinging across his face, and if he wants it, he'll eat it. So with these two-handed rods, you can cast really far, and you can do it in a way where essentially you don't need any space behind you. So a spay cast, you're building up all your momentum, and I'm not a spay or two-handed caster, so I may be out of line here, but when you're casting it, the majority of your energy being built up in that cast is all happening in front of you or to the side of you. So you can be standing up essentially up against a wall with your fly rod and still bomb out a 150-foot cast.
That's awesome.
Now, how that, I don't understand the physics, how everything happening in front of you can still cast that out 150 feet, but it's, once you get that line moving and everything, and I know there's different parts of the fly cast where you're anchoring the line into the water and you're using the water's pull against the line to load your fly rod, and then at the end of that, you're just releasing all the energy. So that sounds cool. I'd like to get into that.
Yeah,
Again,
that's pretty neat.
You just blew my mind with some weird physics stuff that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
Water
you do
over the line
a spay cast. It's interesting, and it's similar to a roll cast that you can do with a normal one-handed fly rod, but it's on a bigger scale. And that's always been something I've wanted to try. It's very common in like the big BC rivers for their migratory steelhead and all that kind of stuff. But down here, there's a few guys that do it, but there's not many. So that'd be neat.
Cool.
Very cool.
I think it's an admirable goal.
Yeah. So we'll use that as our opportunity to segue into a related but separate topic, and that is the photography aspect of your website and your Instagram, and just the outrageously good photography that you have there. I wanted to ask you, why is the photography aspect seem so important to you, and it comes through in the quality of the photos that you post, and how'd you get into the photography side of it as well?
Well, that's weird because I've never once ever considered myself to be a photographer. Like, I use my phone to take my pictures. I'm just a guy out there with a cell phone. I've always been interested in the idea of like composition of a photo. And I've always kind of thought if somebody just wanted to see the picture of a rainbow trout, they'd Google it. So if you're just going to post a general photo that anybody can find on Google, I don't think you're going to really like pique any interest. So I've always kind of thought it's more fun to like find a neat angle, or build a cool composition in the photo, or make it interesting. Like, you want someone to look at the photo, and I'm not saying all my photos do this, but a good photo kind of pulls you in and it makes you look at it for a second, and you kind of you feel something. I'm not saying you feel like some grand emotional epiphany, but a good photo, when you see it, something just clicks, and it's usually there's something different about it. It's unique. Like, I could just post the fish picture, but I mean, so is everybody else.
There
right?
certainly is something about about the work that pulls you in. And there's also something else I noticed. There's a common theme of like the colors, the color grading. It must be a filter you're throwing in or something, because there's a nice consistency there where you've got your colors pop, but then you also have this like almost dark, muted kind of tones to it as well, which is an awesome combo.
The majority of my photos are edited, 100%. And, there's this weird notion people have that photos shouldn't be edited.
Right.
But who edits photos? Every single professional photographer. So,
yeah.
I mean, and it's not about, changing the photo. It's about pulling out various elements, creating a mood. And when you edit a photo, and if you're doing this over time, what you can do is you can create a style, your style, right? So I don't use any filters, but I've edited it in a way that I was happy with. And now what I can do is I can apply a lot of the same elements of that edit I did to other photos to keep that continuation of colors or mood or whatever. And sometimes I post a picture that just doesn't fit with the rest. And it's like, well, whatever, I want to post it anyway. It's my page. I'll do what I want, right? But I've talked to a lot of people in the beginning of when I first started my page and it kind of started to take off. And they asked me, like, any tips? And I say, yeah, be consistent and edit your photos. And they say, well, I don't want to edit my photos. I said, so then you'll never have a style. I mean, unless you use like the composition as a way to differentiate yourself, like people should be able to see your photo and kind of know it's yours without seeing the name above it. Now, that's not going to happen every time, but you should have. And this is just for people who are looking to grow an audience, right? This for your average person who's just sharing their photos with a friend or their friends and family, you're under no obligation to do any of this. And by no means is anyone under an obligation to do this. But if you're looking to grow your page, if you look at almost any successful page, they're going to have, as you scroll down it, there's going to be some sort of a theme or a feeling or a color aspect or something that's going to remain consistent throughout the majority of it. And to do that, just find a way to slightly alter your photos in a way you like, or to replicate a certain kind of composition that you can work into all your photos that allows it to be consistent. But if you're trying to grow on your Instagram page or your whatever page, it's just all over the place, it's not really going to draw people in. You want people to feel like your page is like the continuation of a story, right? Like, and it's, in a sense, it is like, this is me in my life, right? I'm fishing. Here's me doing my thing. And if people have, some people have been following along for years and they've seen pretty much, all my fishing adventures. And for new people that come there that don't know me, they can see those photos. And like I said, it kind of just gives them the impression that there's some sort of continuity. How do you say that word?
Yep.
With what I'm posting, right? Like I always say, like, thanks for following along on the journey. Like, this isn't just me posting random photos. Like, the idea is that over time, in 10 years, I can look back and there's my entire fishing career documented for the most part, right? So, and with photos too, take 500. And then pick the best ones. If you think you're going to go out and take 3 photos and 2 of them are just going to be banging photos, it's not happening. Like, you got to take a lot of photos because you'll find that one that's perfectly in focus, and it makes all the difference. And you can delete the ones you don't like, right? You don't have to hold on to them forever. Don't be shy. Take lots of pictures.
I'm suddenly very self-conscious about my lack of Instagram skill. I don't edit any of my photos only because I don't know how, really. I mean, I know how, I just suck at it, so I don't do it at all.
Takes practice.
Yeah.
There's pages I follow that don't edit their photos. And as long as their page, either the story they're telling, the captions they're putting in, offers something to show that I'm following along with you, then that's fine. Not like it doesn't, the consistency doesn't always have to be the way your photos look, right? You just need something about your page that's consistent, that's going to carry your audience to your next post. Like, you always want to give them something coming down the pipe, another trip you're going to be going on, or stay tuned as this is coming up. Like, you just don't want it to feel like if after every post, like, this page could just stop posting. You want to know, you always want to be leading into something. That's one big tip I found, is give people something to look forward to.
Well, I think that speaks, to why your page has been so successful. I mean, clearly, because I'll tell you right now, I love taking pictures. I love sharing pictures, but my Instagram, I don't put that much thought into it. Like, I don't. I edit the photos the way that I like them. I build my captions based on like literally how I'm feeling about that photo and in that moment. And I'm not even saying I'm good at it. So, but what I am saying is like it makes perfect sense that your page is done as well as it has, and you've done as well as you have with what you're doing, because clearly you're focused on something, and you can see that in your work. So it's cool.
Yeah, and it didn't happen overnight. Like one day, at one point, 3 years ago, my Instagram had 180 followers, the same 5 friends like my pictures every time. And one day I posted a picture and I decided I was going to use hashtags for the first time. And my most amount of likes on a photo was like 5 or 6 up till that point. And then one day that first post with hashtags got 60 likes. And I was like, that's interesting. So then I started learning more about how, I didn't even know what a hashtag was before that. I didn't know how it worked. So I just started learning more and more things. I started learning about hashtags. And it's been, now 3 years where it's not like I sat down right day one and said, I'm going to crack the Instagram algorithm, right? It's just over time, you just learn new ways to tweak your page or new things that start working. And the problem with Instagram is it changes all the time. Like right now, I'm having a hard time growing my page, but it goes in lulls. It has ups and downs, right? And like lately, my content has not been great either because I was not fishing very much for different reasons. And when I get out fishing more and I start getting more content and stuff like that, you see the growth bounce back up. But you got to stick with it too. Like I've had dozens of people message me and ask me how they can grow their page, and I tell them exactly what they should do. And within 2 months, I never see them again. And the trend is that people always quit before 3 months. And at the 3-month mark, for some reason, that's when everyone just decides if they haven't made it yet, they're done. Now, there's obviously exceptions that have pushed beyond that, and most of them, though, have done well for themselves. Like you just need to be consistent, show up every day. If you show up every day, you're gonna do pretty good.
Wow. So not only do we get a masterclass on fly fishing, now we're getting all the Instagram growth hacks and tips and great advice.
Value
Great advice. Yeah, this has certainly been a very value packed podcast for us tonight.
Good. I hope I'm not overwhelming anybody.
No, well, me because I'm like trying to write down everything that you're saying.
You can message me whenever you want about fly fishing stuff, and we'll talk.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
He's like, okay, I need tapered leader. No, scratch that. I don't need tapered leader.
Yeah.
Make sure I'm consistent on Instagram. Tapered leaders.
Tapered leader? And if you like it, you can use it.
I use it because that's what I was told to use. The internet told me that's what I had to do.
I started using it too. You're not alone. We all make those mistakes, right? The only difference is I made them 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Do you guys have any more questions for Brodie or anything else you guys want to talk about?
No, I think we're gonna wrap this up. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So yeah, that's gonna be we're gonna start winding down the podcast.
I think there was one more thing we wanted to get Brodie with.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
You guys have something planned I don't know about, so.
Oh no, you know about this. We're just gonna ask Brodie, what's one of your most memorable fishing times? One of your favorite fishing memories? Can you tell us a story? A fishing story.
One that stands out, and not for any particular reason. It's not a big fish story or a fish that was hard to catch. I remember when I first started getting into fishing, we had 2 family camps. One was a lake trout lake, and the other one was full of bass and pike. So we were at the lake that had bass and pike, and I remember my grandpa told me that if I caught a 5-pound bass, he'd give me $10. And I remember I caught a bass, and he told me, yep, that's 5 pounds. And looking back at this bass, it was probably like an 8-inch bass. But he still, I told him, I don't think it's 5 pounds. And he convinced me that bass was 5 pounds. And he gave me the $10. And I don't know why, but for some reason, that's like my first fishing memory. And for some reason, I got to give that memory credit because that's when I remembered like fishing really kind of taking off for me. Because I realized I thought I caught a 5-pound bass, and I didn't. But at the age of like 4, when everyone else that's been coming in from the lake has always been talking about their 2-pound bass, their 3-pound bass. Now I caught a 5-pound bass. I thought I was like the best fisherman in the world, right? So I don't know if it was just like a big confidence boost in the beginning, but I know my grandpa knew it wasn't 5 pounds. So sometimes there's another fishtail, eh? Like sometimes lying helps because I don't know if he told me the truth. I mean, I'm sure I'd still like fishing, but for some reason, there's a small part of me that wonders if that was like the defining moment that got me hooked and got me excited because I thought I caught a trophy bass. And a 5-pound bass, that's a pretty nice bass.
It's a big bass.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of my
fantastic.
more fondest memories because I think it does hold some responsibility for who I've kind of ended up being. And we don't have that camp anymore, so it's a lot of fond memories growing up there. That's my first memory at that camp, and it's just a happy memory.
That's a great story.
I think it had more to do with the $10.
Yeah, I'm so pretty glad I got 10, and that was in like 1994, 3 or 2 or early 90s. So it was like $20
Yeah,
by today's standards.
$10 is a lot of money back then.
So many penny candies for that.
Back then, I could buy 2 Rapalas with that. Now you can barely buy one.
You can't even buy one, not after taxes and everything.
You can take it alone for those husky jerks.
Yeah.
Nothing worse than losing a husky jerk.
Oh, don't even get me started on the deep diving huskies. Those are like $20 a pop minimum in some places.
The amount of lures I've donated to the lake bottom, I can't even count. But
I know.
It's thousands of dollars worth. Like, honestly, thousands and thousands of dollars worth. But whatever, right? That's fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fishing.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
that's probably the best way to end this podcast right there.
Perfect.
So I want to say thank you to all the people who are watching this live and all the people who are listening to this when they're driving down the road or doing whatever they're doing. And I want to thank Adam and Ben, but especially Brodie, NWO Outdoors, for joining us on our podcast tonight.
My pleasure.
You've been awesome. And if anybody is interested in joining us, we're probably going to do a little bit of hangout in our Discord server after the podcast is over. Actually, I can't right now because I got all this stuff open. Maybe one of you guys can pop a link in the chat to that for anybody who's interested in joining us for a little fishbowl chat.
I got it.
That's it. Before we any closing remarks from any of you three before we shut her down?
No,
Thanks for doing this, Brodie.
Yeah, thanks
for
again.
having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Very
right.
cool. You're insightful.
Ben?
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks again, man. It's great having
Brodie,
you on.
why don't you take us out? Not to put you on the spot.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Tight lines and good luck.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See you.